Welcome to episode 13 of the Lowdown Show. I'm Neil Graham. This week we're talking movies with ADVrider.com Grandmaster Zac Kurylyk. Specifically, we're talking about a new film called The Bikeriders, which is a far better film than the title of it would lead you to believe. But before we dig in, a word from our sponsor. eBay Motors is here for the ride. With some elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love, you transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a drive that's all your own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. Keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, and naturally, exclusions do apply. Shall we take the plunge? Zac, so it was very funny the other night. You sent me a text saying that I should go and see the Bikeriders. As I was in the parking lot, checking my phone before I went in to see the Bikeriders at the local theater, which is actually really cool to see a movie in a theater. I hadn't done that in a while, and especially a movie like this. So it was in a small Ontario town. So it was fortuitous timing of your text. So we both have seen the Bikeriders recently. We both liked it, mostly for various reasons. And do you want to just take us through the story of what it's about?
Yeah, the Bikeriders is basically a reimagining of Danny Lyon's photo book from, I think it was 68. Danny Lyon's book is photos of motorcycling culture in general from that era. And then he has a large section of the book dealing with the Chicago Outlaws Motorcycle Club, which he rode with at that time. And then the end of the book has interviews with the members of the club and their family. So the filmmaker took that book and sort of crafted a narrative around those interviews, used the interviews as the basis of his story, and used it as the source material for this fictional tale of this Midwest biker club that goes on a trajectory, a downward spiral into increased criminality and self-destruction, I guess you could say.
So it parallels your life exactly.
Not quite, but
you don't need to say. You don't need to respond. And just I'm going to add a footnote here as an art school dropout. Danny Lyon's book, The Bikeriders, is really one of the seminal works of sort of photo literature. It really is a significant work over and above its connection to motorcycling, which is what brought us here today. But I actually met Danny Lyon. He was speaking when I was in art school. He came in and spoke to us. And it's a kind of funny footnote is that there was a guy in the audience who stumbled off the street and ended up in the theater where Danny Lyon was talking. It was kind of heckling him, and Danny Lyon, true to form, went down the guy's throat, and a bunch of us had to kind of escort this wayward guy out of the auditorium before Danny Lyon would continue speaking, which just put Danny Lyon in a really cranky mood. I think he wanted to punch someone, and he didn't get the opportunity. So Danny Lyon's the real deal, and he's done a lot of other great work. He was involved in photographing and documenting civil rights protests in the 60s. Did a great book on Chile. So yeah, he over and above this book, he has a huge sort of role in sort of American photo culture. And I would put forth that between Robert Frank's Americans, which is really the great photo book from the 50s, and then a decade later comes Danny Lyon. Those are really the two seminal books, Bikeriders and the Americans. Good place to start. Now, where were we? You gave us the outline of the film. What did you think of it? Was it successful?
I think I enjoyed watching it. I wrote a review on ADVrider and said it was the first film that I could remember that showed there's a motorcycling culture in the U.S. outside California, because that's where all the other biker films are always based, whether it was the old Marlon Brando stuff or the bikesploitation films, or the newer stuff that came out about 20 years ago when they were trying to tag on to the success of Fast and Furious with similar motorcycle movies. They were all based in Los Angeles. And I love riding in Los Angeles. I actually wrote an article about that as well on ADVrider very recently. But Los Angeles is a pretty small place compared to the U.S. as a whole. And I thought it was neat to see motorcycle culture outside the Southwest. And I thought it was a very honest look at early 1%er history. It didn't go into necessarily their criminality perhaps as good as it could have. I mean, these guys were all sitting around drinking beer and riding motorcycles. Where does the money come from for all that? If you know enough about those days, these guys were, they were hoodlums. They were stealing other people's bikes and stealing the parts off them. They were penny ante criminals, but they were still a bunch of, good old boys. They weren't looking to cause any real serious problems to society, unlike what came along later, which is what's portrayed in the movie.
But it doesn't. The movie sort of catches well, first of all, Danny Lyon would have never been allowed to join the Chicago Outlaws and document them if they were in 10 years late, 10 years later, for instance, or 1980. There's no way they would have let a journalist into a club. So it speaks to the naivete of the time, and also that the motorcycle clubs, and this is pointed out in the film. Motorcycle clubs were, the character played by Tom Hardy, who runs the. So what's the club called again?
The Vandals.
The Vandals, right? So really the Outlaws, but they're called the Vandals for copyright reasons. It starts out as a competition club, so it shows them on a bunch of old scramblers, Triumph scramblers and BSA scramblers doing, hare scramble races, and that's where his interest in motorcycling, and then he, the character in the film, Tom Hardy, played by Tom Hardy, sees Brando in the Wild One and decides to start the Vandals. So that's the thing, but it catches this moment before as outlaw clubs sort of transition from riding clubs that are just guys looking to raise shit to what we think of bike clubs now, which are criminal organizations that drive around in cars. So it captures this maybe the last time that we could have via Danny Lyon access to the inner workings of a club like this.
I think that's a fairly accurate way of looking at it. Certainly the members of those clubs in those days were there because they loved motorcycles. That's what they were there for. They weren't there to sling dope and sell machine guns to other ethnic gangs and that sort of thing, which of course is what's been portrayed more recently by Sons of Anarchy and other succeeding miserable shows on television.
Yeah, that was a miserable show, I'll say. Almost as bad. At least Orange County Choppers died mercifully. Although not soon enough. So hey, here's okay. I'm gonna see how nerdy you are. Now you're a pretty nerdy guy, but I want to challenge your knowledge of, and I waited to ask you this question until we were recording. Do you know who the bar that gets burned down? Do you know who the bartender was?
The actor?
Yeah, the actor.
No, I don't. He was very familiar face, and he looks like, and I know it's not the same guy because this guy's super old. He looks like the guy who played the police chief in Mad Max.
No, it's a musician named Will Oldham who goes by the name Bonnie Prince Billy, and he's fabulous. In fact, if you've ever heard one of the seminal Johnny Cash records produced by Rick Rubin, Johnny Cash does an amazing version of a song called I See a Darkness, which is, do you know that song?
No, but I don't know if I would say they were seminal because Johnny Cash was pretty established by then.
No, but yes. hang on. No, I would just disagree. No, but Johnny Cash went to that Bransonville, Missouri. He was, he'd been dumped by his record company. And even his son recently said that he was kind of this weird old grandpa at one point in the 90s. And then he meets, hip hop producer Rick Rubin. And they do these pared back recordings called American Recordings. And one of the songs is I See a Darkness. And that is written by Will Oldham, Bonnie Prince Billy, who plays the bartender in the bar that gets burned down.
Whew. I thought that scene was very interesting because it showed a really important evolutionary point in that club, because they didn't have to burn that guy's bar down. As he says, this is my place. He probably has his life savings tied up on it, and they go burn it down and don't let the police, the police and firemen come, and they're too scared. It shows a shift in that club from being just a bunch of good-natured hooligans into, not nice guys who are really out to start causing trouble.
Well, I mean, it should, I mean, power corrupts, right? If I could go burn down a bar and get away with it, who wouldn't do it just for fun, just to exercise your ability to get away with something? Anyone who's raised children can certainly understand how that works. They will do whatever they can, and until you stop them. I mean, one thing that's interesting about the film is, and I started thinking about the film almost like a Bruce Springsteen record, like Born to Run, for instance. And that Born to Run, I think, is a great record. Although it took me a long time to come to that. But it is every rock cliche. It confronts every cliche. It is bombastic. It's over the top, and works, in spite of itself, is a successful record. And I think this is almost the same thing, because it is. I mean, Tom Hardy, who I said to you that he makes Marlon Brando look like an intellectual. I mean, he is just a massive grunter. And he kind of speaks in this weird, almost effeminate, kind of girly little voice. I mean, he's not this imposing character. I mean, he's my God. I mean, there's this cauldron of something going on inside this man, and yet very little of it comes out. Yeah, but he punches some people, But other than that, so there's Tom Hardy as the guy, and then really the star of the film for me is Jodie Comer, who's the woman who essentially talks to the Danny Lyon character, the who's documenting this, and she is perfect. I mean, just her accent, her Midwestern, flat Midwestern twang, and just her this level of sort of awareness and naivete. And she falls for this character played by Austin Butler, who really is every cliche. And you could make fun of this in some ways because you think, oh, it's just all cliche. But bike gangs, and often motorcycling in general, but bike gangs in particular, are cliches. I mean, it's a bunch of guys that are rebels, that dress up in the same outfit, go to church every week, as they call it, when they meet at the clubhouse, and follow the same rules. I mean, it's Boy Scouts, right?
Yeah, I would agree with you that Comer was the star of the film. I really respected what they did with her, because it would have been easy to do what almost every bike exploitation film does, and have her, run around with half her clothes off, in a set of Daisy Dukes or whatever, and fill it with all this gratuitous sex. But it's not. She plays a very straight up, sort of, like you say, naive but perceptive in areas. This Midwesterner biker mama who really isn't into the scene and knows what it's costing her in the long term. And I think her performance is definitely the highlight, I think, of the film. And I did like Tom Hardy. I know you didn't think he was very intimidating, but I would say I've known guys like that. He's a shorter guy, and he's very stocky. I worked with guys like that on fishing boats and places, and they might not look like much, but they could work like a dog. And that's what he is in the film. He's a blue collar guy. He's a truck driver. And guys like that, as he shows in the film, and obviously his fictional character, but they're capable guys, even though they might not necessarily inspire you at first with their physical size.
Yeah, that's true. I worked in a cement plant when I was a kid, and I remember those kind of guys that they would just kill you for sport. Were capable of doing it. Had you made fun of them like I did and nearly died. That's true. I mean, the Austin Butler character, who is the love interest of Jodie Comer, he's kind of interesting because he may be, in many ways, he's the central character, but he may be the weakest character in the film in a way, or maybe he's the strongest character. Again, back to this notion of cliche. Is he playing a guy in a bike movie, in his own mind? Is that who he is? Or because he seemed a little too, well, first of all, he's got fabulous lips. I mean, he's a cute little, young man, and almost too cute. Like, couldn't he had a bigger scar or something? I mean, you know what I mean? Like it was a little too, I mean, maybe this is the concession on how you get a movie made in Hollywood. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe if this was a new wave French film, he wouldn't have been that pretty.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was a good choice. And some of those shots in the Bikeriders book, The guys that were in the club when Danny Lyons photographed them, some of them were very good looking dudes, and I appreciated the fact that everybody didn't look like they came out of Mad Max's toe cutter gang. Some of these guys were, good looking guys, and there's no wonder that they had women chasing them. These attractive young men riding motorcycles. It certainly would have attracted interest even before the days when they were, the hardcore one percenters with all the glamorous lifestyle that came with it later on. I thought he did okay, but as he said, he was playing a kind of a cliche the whole time. I don't know if that was intentional, if he was supposed to look like he was trying to play this part, or if it was just that was the part that he was stuck with, and that's what he did. I would definitely not have put him at the as the strongest performance in this film. The one actor that I really questioned why they stuck in there was Damon Harriman that played the number 2 biker there at the start of the film. The guy who played Dewey Crow on Justified. I'll never see his face without thinking Dewey Crow. I think he should just retire and work in a corner store or something like that.
Is that the guy that looks like, in profile, looks like, is it Beavis or Butthead? I can't tell, with the big hook nose.
Yes, that's who it is. He's an excellent actor, but he unfortunately sold himself too well in Justified as the redneck Florida hillbilly.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. For this week's fireside chat, we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about old American motorcycles. And for those people who think of me as an Italian motorcycle obsessive, which is true, I haven't always been that. And one of the first bikes I ever rode on the street was a 1947 Indian Chief that I rebuilt with my father, my late father. And I put, 10 or 15,000 miles on this Chief when I was in my early 20s, which was a bit of an anomaly. I was always the youngest guy and the oldest bike. And I'm talking about this because, of course, the Bikeriders has a lot of knucklehead and mostly panhead Harley Davidsons, which, bike riders would have used in the day, club guys. And if you haven't ridden an old American motorcycle, they're very different than what you might think. They're actually quite small compared to a modern bike. And the 47 Chief, I think the weight was about 550 pounds, which is like a 1300 GS loaded up, or any other of the big ADV bikes. So it really isn't that big and has this incredibly low center of gravity. And the bike, it wasn't powerful, but it would really, you could really hustle it. It handled really well. And the girder fork was incredibly rigid because that technology, telescopic fork technology was pretty primitive in 1947. And had a plunger rear suspension, which wasn't the greatest, but it didn't really move much, which was sort of a benefit. And the weirdest thing about bikes of that era is the controls weren't sort of universal yet. So for instance, on the Indian, you had a left-hand throttle. This blows people's minds. A left-hand throttle with no return spring. And the right grip moved as well, but that was your spark advance, which actually turned the distributor to control the spark. And then there was a rocker pedal for your left foot, which was the clutch. And you shifted gears with your hand. So right beside the fuel tank was the shifter for the 3-speed transmission. And it sounds really odd, but I don't think I ever stalled it, or maybe once or twice. And I certainly didn't tip it over. And it was actually far more intuitive than you think. You just can't overthink it. And the thing that terrified people the most was not having a return spring on the throttle, which ultimately was of no concern at all. In fact, it was wonderful because you could set a high idle if it was cold, and it was built-in cruise control. And there would be this perception that once you let off, or if you're downshifting, say, and you put the clutch in, that the engine revs would soar, but you instinctively rolled the throttle back, so it wasn't even an issue. So this is one thing that you should take away from this, is that the throttle return spring is not our best friend. All right, now where were we? eBay Motors is here for the ride. With some elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love. You transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a drive that's all your own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. Keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, and naturally, exclusions do apply. Now back to my conversation with Zac Kurylyk. You're listening to The Lowdown Show, presented by ADVrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. You can't talk biker films, motorcycle films, without cliche. And it seems, and here's a broader question. Every film ever made that includes a motorcycle gets tripped up somehow on the notion of the cliche of a motorcycle. I mean, I've never seen anything other than just a bike passing through. But, you know, for instance, if you give a character in Friends, if somebody's dating, I don't know, I don't even know their names. But if you're dating Monica, and a guy shows up on a motorcycle, it denotes something about the character, doesn't it? And it's like a short list of, oh, he's wild, or he's free, or he does what he's not afraid of danger. I mean, it's a shorthand, to say sort of something mildly rebellious. Although I'm not sure that holds true anymore, because like old guys ride motorcycles and young people don't. So I'm not sure that even holds water. But cliche is something you can never get away from. And the film does pretty well, I think, in general, in dealing with the notion of cliche. Probably maybe better than any film I've ever seen on motorcycling. Would you agree? Even though it has its own cliche moments.
I think so. I think it didn't get bogged down in the bike exploitation cliches that so many people probably went to this film or will go to this film looking for. It's violent, but it's certainly not like a Tarantino style violence that's played up for shock effect. Nobody's cutting somebody's ears off and mailing them to their wife or something horrible like that. There's very brutal violence in it, but it's not the violence and the I guess you would call it romance of the film. None of it's played up for exploitive effect. And I really appreciate that. And there's some corny stuff with, there's a riding montage where they play I Feel Free by Cream. And some of that stuff just doesn't work. I don't think that these guys in real life were sitting around listening to Cream. And I think it was a little too on the nose. A lot of the musical choices in the film felt like that to me. They just didn't fit. It felt like they just got whatever music that they could afford and jammed it in there for the most part.
But didn't it, sorry to jump in, but it seemed like early in the film, the music played more of a role. Then as we got into the narrative, it seemed like from the halfway, from the second act on, it just seemed like the music kind of disappeared in a bit. Is that my imagination, or did I just get drawn into it?
I think you're somewhat right on that. Yeah. There was a bunch of blues music and so on that was played, and I just thought that doesn't really fit this kind of guy in 1967, 68, 69. They weren't hippies and they weren't civil rights marchers or anything, listening to music from different cultures. They would have been listening to, was it Blaine Eddy or whatever those guys listened to?
Yeah, surf rock, or Link Ray, all that kind of crunchy stuff like that. That's true. Now, of course, we can't talk about a motorcycle film without talking about the motorcycles. And I know this is us really being nerdy. But in Danny Lyon's book, there's photographs of a lot of motorcycles. And this is at this point in sort of the club culture. Now, of course, you can't be a Hell's Angel and ride a Virago or a Triumph or anything else. The Harley Davidson is the official vehicle of the Outlaw Motorcycle Club. But at this point in the mid 60s, it wasn't that way. So you see, in Danny Lyon's book, you see Triumphs and BSAs, some, knuckleheads and panhead Harleys, and they're all stripped down. And one of the moments where the film totally face plants is there's a little moment with one of the characters. And in fact, there's a lot of really, if you know the book, there's a lot of almost exact compositions that echo the photographs.
Yes,
in the
very
book.
much so.
Which is a really fun, if you know the book like I do, and I've known it for 40 years, 35 years, it's like, I know that framing, you instinctively know it. And And I totally forgot what I'm talking about. It was late night.
Oh, you were talking about the custom bikes in the film.
Oh yeah, guys, custom bikes. Thank you. So all of the bikes in the film, or most of the bikes in the film, are bone stock, like knuckles and pans, and like with fenders and stuff. And so the moment where the film kind of falls on its chin is that they do this interview with a character, which is one, which I know from the book, and he talks about that our bikes are, none of a stock bike is a stock bike, and our bikes are custom and they're choppers, and we make them the way we want. And there's this total disconnect because they're all riding stock bikes. Now, it's okay to ride stock bikes because maybe it's hard to find enough knuckleheads and panheads to make a film with. I don't know. But then, why put that scene in? Anyway, that's people like us might notice that, or maybe me. I shouldn't probably indict you. So that seemed odd. And all of us, and also the bikes were just like, they weren't riding around in stock bikes. Take the fenders off, put shotgun pipes on them. So that to me, and also the riding stuff, because you can tell they're riding behind a camera car, obviously, but they're on both lanes filling the highway. I mean, they could have done a better job in filming the bike stuff. And I told you off air, one of the coolest things I ever saw was driving on a highway years ago with a bunch of, Satan's Choice came by. It was raining. They come by at 80 miles an hour. They're a foot and a half apart from each other. Miserable conditions. Like Ray and I'd have been under a bridge. And these guys go by, 21-inch front wheels, no front brakes, extended forks. It was the coolest thing. One of the coolest things I've ever seen. And yet this, this movie, I think, could have captured some of that wildness, but it just seemed like it seemed too staid for me, the riding stuff.
The riding scenes, and I was watching them carefully. You can tell that they're on a trailer and the footage is sped up because their faces aren't all flapping in the wind. If you're on a bike with a helmet on, your face is doing all these things and your hair's all over the place, and you can tell you're not going to get a realistic portrayal of somebody going 80 miles an hour on a motorcycle. It's just not going to happen. Some of that stuff, I agree, it could have been better, but you got to accept the limitations of filmmaking and their artistic expression. I will say that the scenes of them riding were, I thought, aside from, as you point, some of the obvious issues with taking up both lanes and that sort of thing, the scenes of them riding, I thought, were beautiful. Riding around in the Midwest fall, it looked like a scene that I could identify riding in. That's what it looks like around here in the farmlands when you go riding in the fall. And I would watch it again just to watch some of those scenes. I thought that they were really beautiful.
Says the guy from New Brunswick. Hey, stop moving your coffee cup. I can hear all that. Yeah, no, I get that. There were some lovely scenes of that. It just didn't capture the visceralness of a hand shift panhead chopper, and which is a guilty pleasure of mine. I love old choppers, and so help me. But I don't ever want to own one. Stop me, in fact, if I ever try to own one, Zach. I'll ask you to
I
do
think if you want to get something like that, there's those kind of films are out there. You watch Chopper Town, The Sinners, or one of those more indie films from inside the scene. You can certainly get that stuff. I think that the restrictions on budget and liability and insurance and everything, you're not likely to get a mainstream film that's going to really show what it's like to ride a bike with no front brake and a hand shift and parts falling off as you fly down the highway. It's probably impractical. If you remember Easy Rider, when they filmed that, they had constant trouble with the bikes when they filmed that. And I think that was only 2 motorcycles. If you add another 15 or 18 motorcycles in the mix, it could be a nightmare trying to get everything running for the day's shoot.
Do you have a film or a moment in a bike film that you think is particularly noteworthy or worthy of conversation?
There's one scene that I've always liked, but I'm ashamed to admit it. That's at the start of the start of Torque, which came out in 2004. It was kind of a sport bike equivalent to the Fast and the Furious. And there's a scene at the very start where they've got the loud music and the guys on their sport bikes, and they're coming on this highway somewhere in California. You see all these windmills in the background behind them. this, and they come up this seat. It just looks like a place you'd want to ride a motorcycle, beautiful road in the desert. But aside from that, I always liked Austin Vince's films, Mondo Enduro, Terra Circa, Mondo Sahara, the third one. But those are more of a sit down and watch the whole thing from start to end and be gobsmacked, not just sit and watch one scene that's particularly beautifully filmed or something like that. I think they're just amazing adventures and real life stuff, real life guys who weren't criminals, weren't one percenters. And they did something that is impossible to do today, because now the ignorance of the greater world that had been put in place by the Iron Curtain, the internet has removed all that. We know everything about everywhere now, thanks to Wikipedia. But when they filmed those movies, that wasn't the case. And I love them for it.
What's the movie? I haven't seen it. What's it about?
Well, the first one was Mondo Enduro. It came out, I think, in 95 or 96. Austin Vince and his friends traveled around the world on DR350s, from England across Europe very quickly, then across Central Asia, then across Russia. And then they took a boat to, I believe, Alaska, and went down the Americas, and then took another boat to Africa and rode up through Africa, then home. It's an amazing film. And there was a book that went along with it that was the daily diary of their trip. The members of their trip, each rider would take a turn filling in a day's entry in the diary. So if you watch the film, it's put together by Austin Vince, who was kind of one of the main organizers of the trip. And Austin has his own perspective in the film, which is very enjoyable. He's a funny guy. And it's a good watch. But because the diary is written from the perspective of everybody, it's a little bit different. And if you enjoy the film and you haven't read the diary, I highly suggest that you should. And it's a different perspective. These guys in the film, it's just, nonstop riding, but in the diary, you get the real day-to-day slog of a motorcycle trip. They spend days and days in these foreign cities looking for parts and waiting for parts and trying to fix things and trying to find girls and trying to find, all these adventures that they couldn't get at home.
So I'm going to tell you about my motorcycle film moment, and it's one scene in a film. Now I have to set the scene for you. So I don't know, I think it might have been 13, and I went to the drive-in theater in my little town with my friend Jeff McDonald in the back seat of an AMC Hornet, and we don't even know what's playing. We're just going to the drive-in with his parents, so we're obviously pretty young. And the film is called My Bodyguard, and it's Matt Dillon is in it, and he plays kind of a thug, and it's Chris Makepeace is the actor, sort of the central character, and he's bullied by this Matt Damon character and befriends this sort of other guy who everyone dislikes, and it's a coming of age film. That's all you need to say, truthfully. And there's a scene in the film where the guy that is ostracized by all the other kids. He has I don't even know what the bike is, an old Honda or something, and he gets it running, and the two of them just hop on, no helmets, and go. And there's this riding scene. And I think at that age, it just, and I mean, the milieu in which I saw it was everything. So here I am in the backseat, sort of coming of age. I'm in the backseat of my friend's parents' Hornet. So what do you crave? Autonomy. I want to be at the movie theater with a girl, even though I would have had no idea what to do with a girl. But that film and that scene where they take off on this motorcycle, just for me was such the autonomy, the freedom that these characters had when they did that was everything. So it's actually pretty decent. I watched the film a few years ago with my daughter. It actually holds up pretty well. My Bodyguard. It's not a cinematic classic, but there's some funny stuff in it, and it's kind of well done. And of course, there's the nostalgic aspect for me. So that would be my choice of a cinematic moment, but really it's not a bike film at all. It's just again, the bike is attached to this character because it tells us something. It's a shorthand, right? This character is kind of a loner, and that's what motorcycles that's what motorcycles can do. No conversation about motorcycles in films, or motorcycle films, as we call them, um, you, you have to ask the question of, is this positive for motorcycling or negative for motorcycling? And I've never really totally, um, like, why are we so concerned about protecting the image of motorcycling? Just because we're motorcyclists? I mean, who cares if people like motorcycling or not? Now, that's just my attitude. Um, but what do you think? Do this whole genre of films about motorcycles, and I mean, it's hard to do because almost all are bad. Let's face it. Almost all motorcycle films are really, really cringeworthy, right?
Yeah, and it's, as you said earlier, it's because the motorcycle is just a cheap shorthand to tell you something about a character. I think the filmmaker who exploited that the best was David Lynch in Twin Peaks. If you remember the series, you probably didn't watch it, but he had one character, James,
What do you mean? What do you
that
mean
was
by
always
that?
riding
I did watch it, a little bit of it.
the first run in the 90s.
Yeah, yeah. I had a
Yeah,
TV.
you
Actually had a TV for a while.
Yeah, you remember James? He was the
Yeah, yeah.
loner, and he had I think it was it a Dyna or a Softail or something, and he was always going off and being broody. I mean, it was almost a mockery of the stereotype that Lynch put in there. I often wonder if some biker ran off with one of his early girlfriends, and he was getting revenge by creating this sort of a mocked up stereotype. Uh, but yeah, as to what you said about whether or not it matters if people even like motorcyclists, I think if we were selling bikes on this, everybody, you meet the nicest people in a Honda, you could definitely have sold some bikes with films like that. Like, what were those beach blanket, beach party bingo, whatever those beach movies were? Maybe those
Like
could sell some.
Annette Funicello and all those. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think they had bikers, bad bikers and good bikers in them, didn't they? I've never seen them. But like the Beach Boys, they could sell some bikes. Those guys, we definitely could have sold a lot of bikes with a clean cut image, but I think it was probably hopeless to expect the public to embrace in at least in North America the transportation form that comes with such inherent dangers. It doesn't matter what you would show it as on film; people just are going to view it as edgy because of the danger that comes with it.
That's true. I just realized I also forgot to say one of my favorite, other than The Bodyguard, one of my favorite references to motorcycles in film, and I think it's a great film. It's My Own Private Idaho, a Gus Van Sant directed film with Keanu Reeves and River Phoenix, and so they have this sort of bizarre homoerotic love affair. But Keanu Reeves has a Norton Commando, and rides a Norton Commando in this film, shot in Portland, and there's some really great, um, kind of bizarre riding scenes. And it's a peculiar film, not entirely successful, but in its successful moments, it's really good. Do you know the film?
No, I've heard the title before, but I've never
Yeah,
seen it.
it's a really it's a real art film, and but as a footnote of interest to no one, is that I painted my Norton Commando yellow because the one that he rode was yellow, and I thought it looked so striking that I painted my Commando. Although I don't have fond thoughts of or memories of my Commando. Um, I put in 4 transmission main shafts because they bent. I bent 4 transmission main shafts. That should not be possible. But it is with an English motorcycle of a certain vintage. Um, so there you have it. Yeah, I'm not sure I mean, from my perspective, I'm not sure that, I think the Bikeriders is about as good as you could ever get on a motorcycle film, really, because I think it manages to kind of address the cliches, but not become so tripped up with them that you couldn't tell a story. And I think and the reason it does is it essentially minimizes. There's not a lot of motorcycles in the Bikeriders, really, is there? When you think of the running time.
No, it's mostly guys sitting around in bars drinking and smoking. But I do think it is a fairly honest look at that scene at that time because it's based on an honest book. I mean, the book is honest, and I think that the film is also honest as a result. I don't think that another bike exploitation film would have helped. motorcycling. We don't need a film version of Sons of Anarchy. Please don't do this. I hope Hollywood, if The Bike Riders is a successful film this year, and I have a suspicion it may become a cult classic, I sincerely hope that Hollywood doesn't take a look at that and say, oh, we need more, we need to redo The Wild Angels, with a new Peter Fonda or something like that. I sincerely hope that doesn't happen, but I'm afraid that it probably will.
I'm a real fan of cinema, and as you know, and a lot of our viewers don't, perhaps that listeners, that I actually have another life where I make documentary films unrelated to motorcycling. And one of my favorite eras of American film is the 1970s. There was this great renaissance in American filmmaking. Some of the names we know: George Lucas, Coppola. One of my favorite, Terrence Malick, made two astounding films called Badlands and Days of Heaven in the 70s, which are must-see films. So it was a decade of auteur-driven films, and there was a weird thing happening in America. So you have the counterculture in the 60s, and as the counterculture is happening, Hollywood is making The Sound of Music. So there's this massive disconnect between what movies are doing, what the culture is doing. And then Easy Rider comes along in 1969 and makes an unbelievable amount of money. It's hugely financially successful. And the studio executives in Hollywood hate the film. They hate the filmmakers. They hate the hairy guys in the films, but it makes money. So all of a sudden, well, they have to follow along. So, and this is an argument put forth by an author named Peter Biskind in a book called Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, which chronicles this roughly decade. And so all of a sudden, the success of Easy Rider, the studio started funneling money to all these filmmakers that they would have had arrested had they come into their offices a few years before that. So the Malick films, The Godfather, all that stuff, you can kind of make this connection that those films were made in part because of the success of Easy Rider. So Easy Rider, although it's an okay film, and it's seminal in the sense that it probably mixed riding scenes and music. It almost anticipated rock videos in a way, generations before MTV. So it was Easy Rider's legacy is far more interesting to me than actually the film itself. It precipitated, if you follow Biskind's argument, which I think is plausible, it actually, there's a lot of amazing films that came out of the wreckage that was Easy Rider. And then, of course, it all died. It didn't last that long. And just very quickly, Biskind makes the point that, Jaws came out, and I think it was 1977. And Jaws was the first movie to open in, hundreds of theaters across the US on the same weekend. Before then, if a film would open in Chicago, New York, and LA, and if Pauline Kael, the New Yorker, liked it, then, it would open up in more cinemas, and it was a word of mouth thing. But Jaws was the blockbuster. And that sort of, that was the end of the auteur-driven film. May it rest in peace. You're listening to The Lowdown Show.
What I think is interesting to ask about the Bike Riders is, why did Disney drop distribution in North America? Because I've never seen it explained. And if it's a success across North America, if people actually get out and watch this film through word of mouth, will the principles behind the film, this sort of honest telling of pre-70s North American culture, will we see that somehow influence future films in general, not just bike films? I know. Will we see, like Easy Rider, will it influence a new style of filmmaking, a new genre, not just bikesploitation, but beyond? I'm not sure. But it'd be curious if the Bike Riders is a success. I'm curious to see what comes as a result. Disney's certainly in money burning mode these days. Maybe they'll regret passing on it. Maybe this will mean something else that's similar will get funded. I don't know what other stories are out there from that era or about people like this, the subjects of this film, but movie making certainly goes in fads, and maybe this will be the start of something new.
I can't imagine, mind you, I've been wrong before. Um, I can't imagine the Bike Riders being a watershed moment in that way. I just don't think. Um, in fact, I was kind of shocked that it showed up at the theater at all. I mean, it was great to see it on a big screen, but I was certainly surprised to witness that. I don't know. I don't. I think it's a. Do you think it's going to be more than just a little bit of a cult film?
That's a good question. What I took away from watching it was that there's no message preached in this film. There's no right wing, there's no left wing. There's nothing about politics, there's nothing about morality, there's nothing. It's just a straight story. And that's very different from what you're getting in most mainstream media today. It's either one side or the other, it's just not a straight story. And if we could get back to media, films, music, books that were like that, I would be very happy. I don't need to turn on the television to be preached at by one side or the other. I don't want that. I want to be entertained. And I think the movie does a good job of that. There's no reference to any political movements at all, except for I think the one guy who always complains about his alleged communist brother-in-law, which at that time would have been something that you would have heard.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see a return to straight storytelling, and I hope that we get, if nothing else, I hope we get that from this film.
In closing, a word from our sponsor. eBay Motors is here for the ride. With some elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love, you transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a drive that's all your own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, and, of course, exclusions apply. Thank you for listening to The Lowdown Show.